In the quiet halls of a neonatal unit, where the tiniest lives depend on the gentlest hands, a shadow of doubt has crept in. Between 2015 and 2016, a series of tragic infant deaths shook the nation. One nurse, Lucy Letby, was held responsible, but now, cracks in the evidence, questions from leading medical experts, and urgent calls from prominent figures are forcing the world to ask, was justice truly served, or has a grave mistake been made? Between 2015 and 2016, a series of infant deaths and unexplained collapses occurred at the Countess of Chester Hospital, sending shockwaves through the neonatal unit and the wider public. Lucy Letby, a nurse in the ward, became the focus of a criminal investigation that would ultimately lead to her 2023 conviction for murdering 7 infants and attempting to murder 6 others. The prosecution presented a case that relied on a combination of statistical evidence, medical anomalies, and personal writings, painting a picture of deliberate harm. Central to the prosecution's argument was a shift chart showing Letby's presence during 25 critical incidents. The chart suggested a pattern. Each time a baby suffered a collapse or unexplained deterioration, Letby was on duty. Prosecutors argued that the probability of these events coinciding with her shifts by chance was extraordinarily low. This statistical analysis was presented as evidence of intent and premeditation, forming a cornerstone of the case. In addition to the statistical correlations, the prosecution relied on blood test results from several infants. Certain anomalies, including irregular glucose levels, were interpreted as potential evidence of insulin poisoning. These medical findings were presented in court as highly suspicious and indicative of deliberate intervention. The third pillar of the case was handwritten notes found in Letby's possession. Some phrases, taken at face value, were construed as confessions, such as the chilling line, "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them." Prosecutors argued that these writings reflected a mindset of guilt and responsibility for the deaths. Together, the statistical evidence, medical data, and personal notes created a narrative of premeditated harm. The prosecution argued that this combination left little room for doubt. Letby's presence, medical anomalies, and writings collectively pointed to a deliberate campaign of infant murders within the neonatal unit. It was this multi-layered approach that ultimately persuaded the jury to convict, setting the stage for one of the most high-profile and controversial criminal cases in recent UK history. While Lucy Letby's conviction rested on statistical patterns, medical anomalies, and personal writings, emerging evidence has cast significant doubt on the prosecution's narrative. In early 2025, an international panel of 14 medical experts, led by retired Canadian neonatologist Dr. Shu Lee, re-examined the cases and concluded that there was no medical evidence to support claims of deliberate harm. Their analysis suggested that many of the infant deaths could be attributed to natural causes, complications inherent to neonatal care, or systemic hospital errors such as delayed diagnoses and inadequate staffing. The panel also scrutinized the statistical evidence used to link Letby to critical incidents. Experts argued that the shift charts presented in court were flawed, relying on selective data that ignored other possible explanations for the timing of adverse events. Variables such as increased patient acuity, fluctuating ward activity, and staffing patterns were not accounted for, raising questions about whether the supposed pattern could genuinely indicate intentional harm. In addition, the interpretation of blood test anomalies has come under renewed scrutiny. What prosecutors described as signs of insulin poisoning were reassessed, with experts emphasizing that abnormal glucose levels and other irregularities could have non-criminal explanations.
Lucy was charged with 7 murders and 7 attempted murders. In our opinion, the medical evidence doesn't support murder in any of these babies, just natural causes and bad medical care.
Dr. Lee and his team have done all of this pro bono, all of this entirely out of the good of their heart, and he's come here today, I suspect at his own expense, to address this issue and put right what I think, anyway, is one of the major injustices in modern times.
Including medical error or natural variability in neonatal metabolism. This reevaluation undermines one of the key pillars of the original case. Even handwritten notes previously presented as confessions are now being reinterpreted in context. Psychologists and legal analysts have suggested that the writings could reflect stress, self-blame, or anxiety rather than admission of murder. Together, these emerging doubts have prompted legal teams and medical experts to question the foundations of Letby's conviction. The combination of flawed statistics, misinterpreted medical data, and ambiguous writings paints a very different picture from the one presented at trial. One in which systemic failures and human error, rather than deliberate criminality, may explain the tragedies that unfolded in the neonatal unit. Following the emergence of new expert analyses, Lucy Letby's legal team has intensified efforts to challenge her conviction. In 2025, they submitted an 86-page report to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, CCRC, calling for a thorough re-examination of the case. The report highlighted serious concerns regarding the interpretation of insulin-related blood tests, the statistical evidence linking Letby to adverse incidents, and the handling of handwritten notes that were previously presented as confessions. The legal team argued that these elements, which formed the core of the prosecution's case, may have been misleading or misinterpreted, raising fundamental questions about the fairness of the trial. The push for a review has gained momentum in the public and political spheres. Former Health Secretary Sir Jeremy Hunt publicly called for an urgent re-examination of the case, describing the issues raised by medical and statistical experts as serious and credible. His statement underscored the significance of the emerging doubts and added weight to calls for renewed scrutiny of Letby's conviction. Hunt emphasized the importance of ensuring that justice is both served and seen to be fair, highlighting the high stakes involved in revisiting a case that has captivated national attention. Amid these developments, the public inquiry into infant deaths at the Countess of Chester Hospital continues. It aims to investigate how these tragedies occurred, whether systemic failures contributed, and what lessons can be learned to prevent similar events in the future. Legal analysts suggest that the combination of expert critiques, flawed evidence, and high-profile calls for review could pave the way for a fresh appeal, even after two previous unsuccessful attempts. As the case unfolds, it raises broader questions about the reliability of statistical and medical evidence in criminal trials, the interpretation of ambiguous data, and the safeguards needed to protect both patients and healthcare professionals. Lucy Letby's legal battle is now intertwined with national debate, systemic reform, and the ongoing search for truth in a case that has profoundly divided opinion. The Lucy Letby case has become more than a legal battle. It is a lens through which the healthcare system, criminal justice process, and public trust are being scrutinized. Beyond the individual allegations, the case has exposed potential vulnerabilities in how statistical and medical evidence is interpreted in court. Experts have questioned the reliability of shift charts, the interpretation of neonatal blood tests, and the weight given to ambiguous personal writings, highlighting the danger of drawing definitive conclusions from complex, multifactorial data. The public inquiry into infant deaths and unexplained collapses at the Countess of Chester Hospital seeks to uncover whether systemic failures, such as understaffing, lack of oversight, and procedural shortcomings, contributed to the tragedies. Its findings may not only clarify what happened in the neonatal unit, but could also influence hospital policies and national standards in neonatal care, emphasizing the need for robust safety protocols and transparent reporting mechanisms. At the same time, the case has ignited broader debates about justice and accountability. Former Health Secretary Sir Jeremy Hunt and other high-profile figures have highlighted the serious and credible questions raised by medical experts, calling for urgent re-examination of Letby's conviction. The intersection of medical uncertainty, statistical interpretation, and legal decision-making has raised critical questions. How can the justice system balance the presumption of innocence with the compelling desire to explain tragedy? Public response has also been notable. Supporters of Letby have organized protests demanding her release, citing emerging doubts, flawed evidence, and expert critiques. These demonstrations, often peaceful but highly visible, reflect a growing segment of the population who believe that her conviction may be unjust, and that a re-examination is necessary. The broader implications extend to families, healthcare professionals, and society at large. For parents, the case underscores the fragility of trust in healthcare. For medical professionals, it highlights the risks of misinterpretation and the importance of evidence-based protocols. And for society, it serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of certainty, the perils of statistical overreach, and the imperative to pursue justice carefully, even in emotionally charged cases. Lucy Letby's story is not simply about one nurse or one hospital. It is a reflection of systemic pressures, the complexity of neonatal medicine, and the enduring pursuit of truth amid doubt. If Lucy Letby is innocent, her story is a heartbreaking reminder of how easily doubt and fear can cloud justice. A nurse entrusted with the lives of the most vulnerable should be celebrated for her care, but instead, she has spent years behind bars, her name tarnished by evidence now questioned by leading experts. Families, medical professionals, and the public must ask themselves, how many lives and careers could be upended by flawed interpretations, misapplied statistics, or ambiguous writings taken out of context? The protests, the calls from high-profile figures like Sir Jeremy Hunt, and the international scrutiny of her case are not just headlines. They are a plea for fairness, a demand for truth, and a call to protect innocence in a system too easily swayed by fear. If Lucy Letby did not commit these crimes, then justice has not only failed her, it has failed society. In the end, the real victims are not just the infants lost, but also a person whose life, career, and dignity sang in the balance. To honor both truth and humanity, the justice system must listen, reconsider, and act with courage. Lucy Letby's story reminds us that justice is fragile, and that until every doubt is resolved and every piece of evidence is examined with care, the presumption of innocence must remain a guiding principle. The nation, and indeed the world, must wait and hope that clarity, fairness, and compassion prevail,